Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 155 of the Hammer Territory podcast. My name is Brad Rowland. I'll be joined in a moment by a special guest on today's podcast. His name is Gaurav Vedak. He covers the Atlanta Braves farm system for Peach State Prospects, a podcast that you should be listening to, as well as he is a writer at Battery Power, as well as Baseball Prospectus, and does all kinds of stuff in the Braves and baseball-related space. But I wanted to tee this up a little bit because we recorded it on Tuesday evening before the Braves played on Wednesday. Nothing massive from today for the Braves. They did win on Wednesday afternoon, a double in Jurickson Profar's first ever Braves plate appearance, which is nice to see. Both he and Ozzie Albies, who had not played to date, debuted in 2025 on Wednesday. That's good to see as well. Matt Olson hit a towering home run. Matt Olson is quite good at baseball. Drake Baldwin, who we will actually be discussing on this podcast, had a double for the Braves today. And on the pitching side, AJ Smith-Shawver looked quite good. And that reminds me to kind of go ahead and say this again. We recorded this on Tuesday before Smith-Shawver pitched. We'll be discussing Smith-Shawver and Baldwin and Caminiti and many others on this farm system check-in with Gaurav, but I want to at least give you that little bit of timestamp basically on this podcast to let you know that we recorded this yesterday. Also, I'd encourage you to listen to the podcast or watch it from Tuesday evening with myself and my usual co-host, Scott Coleman. We discussed the latest with the Braves, some roster cuts, all that fun stuff at spring training. We are rolling along into spring training. If you are a new listener, welcome aboard. We are part of the Foul Territory network of podcasts. We are covering the Braves year-round here at Hammer Territory, so please subscribe anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes Apple and Spotify. That also includes YouTube. On the video side, please watch this video and also like this video, comment, etc. And please, for us, as a favor, tell your friends about the podcast as well. All right, no more further delay here. We'll dive in right now to Prospect Talk with Gaurav, and here we go with that. We are joined today by a special guest, someone I've wanted to have on the podcast for a while, and you might not remember this, but I do, Gaurav. You were at least a couple times on the old Talking Chop podcast with me and Carlos Collazo long ago. And this is kind of that same podcast. It's mutated a few times, but here we are. Gaurav, what's going on, man? How are you?
Man, super happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Brad. Just excited about baseball. Hardly got any work done today at that, the split squad game. So hardly got any work done. We're entering prime how does Brad sleep season, so looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, we've certainly arrived as soon as baseball starts. It's already bad enough with basketball, but yeah, once there are games happening, at least at night, it gets worse. So spring training's actually not so bad because the games are in the afternoon, so there's a little bit more time to watch and get everything done. But yeah, once they start playing at 7:00 or later, it gets pretty dicey in my household. But no, we'll mostly focus on prospects, but certainly feel free to get in any big picture major league takes along the way if you have them, obviously. But look, I want to start here. This is not exactly a rosy thing to start with, but I think it's interesting because I know Scott and I in particular always admit we are not prospect guys. Like I try to monitor the guys that matter, but I rely on people like you, honestly, and Garrett and others that like really watch Eric Cole, my guys who really watch the system to kind of tell me who to look at. And then I kind of look at them like I'm not grinding AA tape most of the time, basically. And someone like me or someone like a more casual observer of the minor league system, the Braves are ranked in the bottom 5 of like every single farm system ranking right now coming into the season. And I wonder what you make of that as someone who knows the system very well. And obviously you guys do a great job at Battery Power and all over the place scouting these guys. But does that track for you, or do you find it that the Braves system is maybe underrated in your mind?
I think it's underrated, but at the same time, it's a pretty fair assessment. A lot of the problems that the Braves farm system has right now is that lack of elite talent in the upper levels. If you look at it, even if you look at the battery powered top 30, I think we had something like 3 or 4 prospects at AAA total. That includes Drake Baldwin, AJ Smith-Shawver, Nacho, and Hurston Waldrep. 2 of those being Nacho and Hurston, I don't really foresee as impact players at the major league level. So you're looking at a really low amount of high quality depth at the higher end, and that's always going to end up really impacting your overall assessment. When all of your players and all of your high impact lottery cards are stashed in high A or low A or around there, it's really hard to evaluate because you don't know if they're going to be sure things or not. So like overall, there has been a really high increase in talent in the system, but that assessment by all those different companies, I think, is pretty fair. It's just it's you got high lottery talent in some of those international players, but you've seen what they've done over the past couple of years, and it has been a struggle. So as rough it is as it is to say, I think it is pretty fair to put them, kind of in that bottom third overall.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I guess the question I would have is like, kind of, how did we get here? Is it just as simple as guys graduated and look, the Braves have hit really well on their guys. It's a nice problem to have, but you got guys like Harris and Strider who all kind of hit, and guys that didn't actually hit as well, like Vaughn Grissom got traded at the right time, for instance, et cetera, et cetera. Is it as simple as that? It's just graduations and trades and things. Also, I remember this. People kind of almost have memory hold this now, but they kind of were almost out of the international game for a while based on the sanctions that they had. Is that part of this too? Like, how did the Braves get to this point where, at times they've had really good systems and at times they haven't had great systems, but like, where are they at where they are right now, kind of in a rebuilding phase of their minor league group?
I think it's really a few different things. One, it's definitely that angle of graduating those prospects super quickly. The Braves have been known to really quickly develop and promote players, and before you know it, they go through 3 leagues in one season, and then they're fighting for a spring training spot at the beginning of next year or the following year. So like, there's that for sure. Secondly, is those lack of that really long period of no international signings. You were unable to really use and well, one, acquire players like what they have now, who's like a Jose Perdomo, Luis Guanapa, those high value, really high ceiling prospects. So one, you're not able to get those. And then two, you weren't able to really trade with any teams. You can't
Yeah.
trade away any of your high value lottery tickets to acquire major league talent. So it's not even just an impact on the farm system itself. You could see the Braves being maybe perhaps a little more reserved in the trade market because they don't have those assets that they used to have. So it's really an accumulation of a few things. Some of their draft strategies have been interesting. It's been heavy pitching dominant over the past few years, and we're seeing now a real deep dive into analytics when it comes to pitching as well. So it's like a few different things. Not being
Yeah.
able to sign players, and really the biggest thing is graduating. 8 to 9 players in a very short amount of time.
I wasn't thinking about this till right now, so forgive me for springing this on you, but there was this discussion, you might have seen it online, maybe in the last week or so, about the Braves' first round record in the draft the last several years. People were just being like, "Hey, what's going on with their first round picks?" And
Yeah.
my initial reaction was basically like, "Look, this is not the NBA where the first round is the only thing that matters, but at the same time, you don't want to miss on first round picks repeatedly." And I think it's better than it might seem. Like, even they might someone like Kyle Wright, for instance, who like kind of hit and kind of didn't. He had the one
Hmm.
great season and
Hmm.
all that stuff. But is there anything to that? Is it just as simple as sample size is too small, or is it something that you're actually concerned about with this group? Because obviously the front system, the guys that run it have also changed. Other than Alex, they've made some big changes in the front office too. Like, what does that tell you, if anything, about their philosophy in the first round stuff?
Yeah, the first round record isn't very great.
Yeah.
I personally, going through each year, I have my own, first round picks. I have my own value for those picks, and I haven't personally agreed with the first round pick for the Braves outside of last year's Caminiti for quite some time. I think that, and then you see the rough success of the international system itself, and you are seeing a lot of changes in the Braves front office. I think they're trying new ways of evaluating players. Actually, this year is going to be super interesting to really see how it all comes together. If that draft strategy is going to be different coming into this season, will they value? Uh, there's been a clear delineation, right? You've seen the draft be pitcher heavy, and you've seen the international signing period be really hitter position friendly. And it's going to be interesting with the new front office pieces if that's going to continue, or if they're going to try and just go, hey, I want the best player available regardless of when we're signing them. It's something I'm going to be watching this year. It's unfortunate, but yeah, the first round success, going back to your original point, the first round success has not been that great. And I've often left my head scratching, wondering what exactly they were thinking. You look back and the Braden Shoemakes, it's
Hmm.
just what's going on. Don't really have first round grades. It has been interesting. I haven't agreed with it. It's not sexy to talk about, and we're just hoping that Cam Caminiti from last year is going to be starting the new kind of regime and the new line of thinking, and maybe hopefully a new line of luck for the Braves when it comes to that pick.
Your hair is so much more than what you see when you look in the mirror. With Nutrafol's science-backed whole body approach, nourish growth from within and achieve your best hair yet.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, Trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
Physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients, Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning like stress, hormones, and aging through whole body health.
Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol for a limited time. Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code FOUL. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code FOUL. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code FOUL.
I haven't asked you about some players, of course, but before I do that, you might have even alluded to it already with kind of the lower level of the minors, but is there a strength of the system right now? Is it just as simple as like they're better for further away? Pitcher, I mean, obviously they drafted pitching heavy at times. Like, what is the strength of the system if they have one? Is there anything that stands out to you as like their thing right now?
It's definitely pitching. When you go with those many quality arms, when you drop that many arms, it's just going to accumulate over time. It's definitely pitching. The position players are starting to get there with those high value, with those really high bonus players. But 1 through 30, I think a solid 70% are going to be pitching prospects, and a lot of them are going to be the higher rated prospects outside of someone like Drake Baldwin.
Yeah, we'll probably play it again later, but I recommend people read the Battery Power Top 30 that you just kind of subtly referenced there. People should be reading that. I know I read those. Is it twice a year, 3 times a year that you guys do
3
those
times
updates?
a year, yeah.
And those are very. I mean, look, for someone like me, again, raise my hand. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I learned a lot from those, and a fresh one in the last few weeks. So read that at batterypower.com, and I'm sure we'll reference that throughout this discussion. Look, you mentioned Baldwin. He's of course like the talk of the town right now. So let's start with him as far as the players are concerned. I think he got was he number 11 on a Fangraphs rate? Like he's getting up in that top tier or top tier 1A in some of these places as the highest rated guy they've had in a while in some of these services. It's not a huge spoiler, I don't think, to say he's number 1 on your list. If you want me to redact that, I will, Gaurav. But I think he's number 1 on the battery power list. Look, it's weird too, and we'll get into maybe some of this stuff as well. But what do you make of the player? And then we can talk about maybe the projection, given that the Braves have Sean Murphy on their team as well.
Yeah, the player itself is one of the best prospects, especially positional prospects the Braves have had in quite some time. You know, behind the plate, he is a really good framer. He calls a good game. He has great rapport with every single pitcher. I haven't ever heard of any kind of issues he's had with whether it be a starting or a reliever. He's calls a great game, great framer. He's everything you want behind the plate. Has a really solid pop time. He can't necessarily control the running game, but he can make sure you don't go crazy. And then at the plate, the approach is fantastic. He's by every definition of the word, he's a fantastic athlete. You know, I talk about this. I've written about this. His junior year in high school, he led the state of Wisconsin in scoring in hockey, varsity hockey. That's the kind of athlete that he is. Great pitch recognition. He doesn't expand his zone too often. He might struggle sometimes with the really high heat. And when I mean high, I mean location wise, not necessarily velocity wise. But other than that, he does a great job of making the pitcher come to him. He's able to hit it to all parts of the park. He's able to hit it for power. You know, the speed isn't anything to go crazy for, but he's got pretty much everything else. And again, he's probably one of the best positional prospects that I can remember, you know, even dating back to, well, I guess Michael Harris isn't that long ago, but someone like a Michael Harris, someone like an Ozzie Albies, the type of positional prospect where you're like, yeah, that's a major league guy for sure.
Yeah, maybe not quite in the Acuna zone of like uber elite, but maybe the next guy down kind of thing. Obviously, no guarantee this is gonna be as good as Harris or Albies has been, but does that seem right? Like as far as like prospect caliber, maybe a tier down from Ronnie, but pretty darn high up there as far as
I think that's more than fair. Like a Dansby Swanson, someone that you want to represent your team, that you want to see on an everyday basis. Not necessarily an absolute superstar like Ronald is, but you know, someone that's going to be an above average player for a very, very long time. I simply don't see a world where Drake Baldwin is below average at nearly any point of his career. That's how sure of a prospect I think he is.
Yeah, that's high praise. I mean, that's not. I mean, even people that focus on prospect, like, you know, I know you well enough to be like, you're not going to throw that out there willy nilly about a guy, especially when they haven't done anything in the majors yet. Like there's always a tiny bit of risk when you've never done it before, but it speaks to the polish that he has. It's funny. We had Justin Toscano on the show last week as we're talking and talked about Baldwin a little bit. And then I actually, on a radio interview, doesn't matter, but was asked about him, and everyone seems to be a little bit not confused, but like uncertain about how it's going to work with him. And not because of anything with him. It's that, often catchers, and this, like sometimes there are catchers who are catchers in name only, who are catchers at lower levels, who are really hitters, and they end up moving off catcher. Bryce Harper is a great example of this, for example. Like he was the wonderkid catcher. He stopped catching pretty early. It happens sometimes. But by all accounts, and you literally just said it, Baldwin is going to be a pretty good defensive catcher, if not better than that. So you wouldn't want to just move him for no reason, but you are committed to Sean Murphy on an extension that's real money. It's not crazy money, but it's real money for several seasons. And yeah, you could have them both. It is catcher. It's the one spot you can have multiple guys at that actually play on a regular basis. But it's not the best for Drake Baldwin to be the 35% part of a platoon at whatever, the young age that he is. So as the prospect guy, how would you want to see Drake Baldwin handled right now, given that Murphy is there? Do you want Baldwin to be in AAA this year? Do you want him to be DHing some? But it's hard to do that when you have Marcell Ozuna. Like there isn't really an easy solution, but I wonder what you think about what they should do and what they maybe will do.
It's one of the tougher situations that I can really remember in my mind. I think despite how fantastic he was last year, the sample size still isn't that huge. So it's not necessarily that big of a risk to keep him in AAA this year. You have Chadwick Trump that's more than capable of being a backup catcher at the major league level. So having someone like Chadwick and Sean up in Atlanta this year, and then next year, especially with Marcell potentially leaving, open up a few more at bats for Drake. I couldn't agree with you more. I think Drake needs to be some kind of everyday. You cannot simply leave his bat on the bench. There's no reason to. He's too good at too many different things that if he's only going to be playing 30% of the time, he shouldn't be on your team. You should be using him to get players that will play. So I think, for this year, I could foresee him staying in AAA most of the time unless an injury happens. But really, if he might end up forcing himself out of the organization, meaning, there's just no playing time on the big league team. You're not going to, like you said, you're not going to bench someone like Sean Murphy, who's got the accolades on both sides of the plate or both sides of the ball. He can do it, he can do it all. And then Chadwick, again, a solid backup. So like, you're not going to get rid of either one of those, and you're not going to play Drake 30% of the time. So it's either going to be, he's going to be in AAA or he's going to be on another team. And I really hope the Braves don't move away from him.
Yeah. It seems like that's not what they want to do at the very least, or they maybe already would have. Like it would have been, it was on my radar this winter. I don't know if it was on yours. Like maybe it would have been a time to trade him at a high point if you were going to go heavy on someone, whatever it was. I know they were tied to Garrett Crochet at one point. Like there were some bigger names that it might have cost someone like Baldwin in a trade, and the Braves didn't do that, which probably speaks to how they feel about Baldwin to some degree as well. And also, it's a good problem, but Marcell Ozuna is like one of maybe 5 like full-time DHs in the majors now that are like good enough to justify that. If he's not there, like your life becomes easier, not because you wouldn't have Marcell because he's a really good hitter, but like you could play Ronnie at DH some, take some time off of his legs. Like most teams like to rotate that spot some, and the Braves just can't because Marcell is too good at this moment.
Exactly.
But that would help you. I mean, that is the pathway to having Murphy and Baldwin on your team is having the DH spot. I actually want what you think about this one, and I promise we'll move on. But how about a situation where you get to like, I don't know, late July, August, and it's like clear Baldwin is too good for AAA at that point? Do you just bring him up and play him 30% of the time, 40% of the time, the rest of the season, just because, the season's over at some point in the minors? It's better to have him with the big league club. Is that a situation that would like bother you as prospect development guy that I'm putting you in that role, obviously on this podcast? Is that reasonable? Like, is there a point of the season where it does make sense to kind of have him called up, even with Murphy available and fingers crossed playing well?
If he plays a full season of ball this year, like he did in AAA last year, personally, I think it's okay if you have him up in the majors just in case something happens. He would, at that point, he would be at the part of his progression where he's got nothing else to show in AAA. He's got nothing else to show in minor league baseball. So going against some guy that pitched in the majors a handful of times doesn't really do him justice. It doesn't make him better. So there conceivably, yeah, I could see that kind of scenario play out, especially if he plays at the exact same level that he did last year. Because what he did with that bat, what he did with his batting profile was really truly. It's tough not to say elite. That's how good he was. So I could see that situation play out. I would honestly, I wouldn't hate it. That means
Yeah.
he was as good as he was last year, and he's going to be a pretty much not a sure thing, but he's going to be a good thing in the major leagues. And then you just find a way to get his bat in there.
And there is, the thing about catcher is there is time. He wouldn't. It's not like he would just never play. Like
Yeah.
the Braves have not wanted to call guys up to ride the bench, which makes total sense. Like this, but when they called up Vaughn Grissom the first time, it's because they had it in. Ozzie was hurt, and they kind of had to go to. Well, they didn't have to, but they chose to do that when he could play every day for a while. Even with Nacho Alvarez, they did it for a little while this last year. He's a different tier of prospect, but they don't like to call guys up just to sit the bench. But at catcher, he would be playing 2 or 3 times a week, and that's more reasonable. I feel like not in April. I think we agree that you don't do that right away. But once it definitely becomes, if it becomes extremely clear that he's not learning anything, to kind of say what you said, like, okay, and look, I think he's better than Chadwick Trump. Like we agree that Chadwick Trump is like a perfectly reasonable backup catcher. And one of my hobby horses has always been, people just don't understand how bad backup catcher is in baseball. And I don't mean that in a negative about Chadwick Trump, but like he's a very normal backup catcher in Major League Baseball.
Absolutely.
It's just that the Braves just happen to have 2 awesome catchers a lot for a long time now, but most teams do not have that. In fact, like 28 teams don't have that. Like it's not a normal thing to have a guy like d'Arnaud as your number 2 catcher. Like he was the best one of those in the league the last few years. So I get it.
I definitely agree with you there. It's not normal to be in the same position that the Braves are in, and he would still be getting playing time. So honestly, I think that might be like the best case scenario, because that means Drake is doing really well and he's forcing himself up in Atlanta. And we get, it's not like Sean Murphy is a bad catcher. He had 1 bad season.
Well, yeah,
right?
and there's also the whole thing about Murphy where look, the Braves, and look, they may break this rule at some point, but it's been a pretty unwritten rule that the Braves are not trading guys that they extended on these team-friendly deals. And I've already seen people, and I get it from fans, like, why don't you trade Murphy? And I'm not saying they won't or they couldn't, but they won't do it now for sure. And like Alex has been pretty clear he doesn't want to do that on these deals that were signed the way that Murphy's deal was signed. Now it becomes different if he's tailing off. If you are the pessimist on Murphy, which I am not, I'm an optimist on Murphy, generally speaking. But if he's bad again, it becomes a discussion for sure. Yeah. But at the moment, I think I'm banking on a bounce back from Murphy, which makes it it's a good problem to have. But I'm using problem in a very very loose context, but it creates some challenges. So beyond Baldwin, we can talk about all day, but we'll stop. The 2 guys I think, like, as far as like in the major league discussion that have been out there this winter into spring are Smith-Shawver, who's already been up a few times, and Waldrep. As we record this, Waldrop's already been sent to minor league camp, so it seems like he's off the radar for now as far as like the major league roster. But those 2 guys have both debuted already. Waldrep, a first-round pick. Like, they're very prominent names that people know. What do you make of them right now? And you can go one at a time if you want to, but like they're on that periphery where the Braves are clearly, it seems like, leaning towards, we'd rather have Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson make starts than these guys right now. But they're also big names compared to a lot of prospects. So, like, I guess I'll just ask you for kind of a check-in on where you are on Waldrep and Smith-Shawver.
Definitely. So when it comes to Smith-Shawver, I'm still as high as ever. Last year, if you really dig into some of the tape, you could tell that the Braves were really focusing on some of the secondaries. And towards the end of the season, it looked like he really found the true slider that he wants to use really in high leverage situations moving forward. That, combined with some injuries to start the season, really kind of derailed his overall stats. But I think, and personally, I believe that AJ Smith-Shawver will have his breakout year this year. There's just too much, as long as he stays healthy, there's just too much to like about it. And I think the only reason his stock is down, really, and why he's not being considered for that, this last 2 spots in the rotation, is he hasn't shown that consistency. But the skill is absolutely there. And if he's able to put it together, I think not only does he take over one of those spots in the rotation, he's a mainstay in the rotation for quite a while. When it comes to Hurston Waldrep, I am a lot lower on. And that's mainly unfortunate. That's unfortunate. Yeah. I really, really want to like him because he's got a true 80 grade splitter. That is one of the best pitches I've ever seen in my life. But the biggest problem with him is his fastball, not just command, but the shape of his fastball. It is quite flat. And so really hitters just kind of tee off of it, and you can sit back and let the splitter do its work. But when he's forced to throw that fastball, it's either going to be a ball or it's going to be something that every hitter can dream of. And it sucks to say that because I want to be, you want to be high. This is someone that talks about and like watches prospects all the time. You see what Hurston Waldrep can do. He was throwing 98 miles an hour. He does have that wipeout splitter. One of the best. It would be one of the best pitchers in the majors right now. But I just haven't seen it from him. And when you're really forced to be a true one pitch pitcher, that already changes your profile to more of a reliever. And when that one pitch is just a splitter and he doesn't have at least a solid enough fastball to keep hitters at bay, it just doesn't scream good profiles for me. And, that's the biggest thing I'm watching from Hurston is how is his fastball shape? Is he going to perhaps throw like a cutter? Is he going to have some sinking action to it? Like that's the biggest thing for me to take from Hurston this year. If he's able to show me something different there, I think his stock really goes back up. But for right now, like the reason that we have him in the top 10 in battery power is that 80 grade splitter. Like it's absolutely filthy in a 98 mile an hour fastball. That's a combo that screams MLB ready, but the pitches just aren't there. And right now, I don't see him anything more than like a low leverage reliever in the majors.
Yeah, it's interesting, obviously, and people have kind of forgotten. I know you haven't, but people kind of because Waldrep arrived later. He's older than Smith-Shawver, which people I think don't really understand. Like I get why, because I think he was drafted 2 years later. But Smith-Shawver's only 22 and will be 22 this entire season, despite the fact that he feels like he's been around for a long time and he hasn't been. He's still very young. I always kind of wondered, and look, I'm not an expert on this stuff. But first to say, I was wondering if like there was something in there about Waldrep that was like going to end up being a reliever. Not that they drafted him as a reliever. You don't do that, but like there was maybe that was a fallback option in their minds because of what you just said. Like you could be a one pitch pitcher as a reliever. We've seen that happen. It's you could function in that way. You can't start though if you're a one pitch guy. It's probably not going to work. So that's interesting to me. And obviously they're not going to bail on him early because look, he's a first round pick. They obviously believe in him. But there is a world, and I've floated this before. Like maybe you look up and it's July or August, and he's in the Braves bullpen, like because that's just what their best role for him is, and they might need help there. Like this is a group that's got a lot of uncertainty in the bullpen that we can talk about or not talk about. But that would be not shocking to me. Not Smith-Shawver, I think he'll start. But Waldrep, I would not blow me away if he was in the bullpen at some point this year. Just to see, not even just because of him, but because like it might play up there and it might be intrigued by him being able to help them in that role. I don't know.
Honestly, just quickly, if Hurston's in that role this year, that means he's had a phenomenal 2025, and that would make me just really happy. And so that's a complete win situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure it wouldn't always be viewed that way. But I think you and I agree, like if you're contributing to the major league club at age 22, 23, that's usually a good sign, even though, and look, it's not a death sentence either. Like there have been plenty of examples of guys who were high pedigree pitchers that were relievers first in the majors. And then they kind of worked their way out of that and started starting later. It doesn't mean that you can never start again, but they might be like, all right, Hurston, this is what we're going to do for now. And look, they're a contending team. If they were the Pirates, they wouldn't do that. Or maybe the Pirates is a bad example because they actually have a lot of pitching. But pick a bad team that's not the Pirates. They wouldn't do that. But when you're trying to win the World Series, and that might be what they think is the best thing in the moment. This is not exactly the most important thing on a prospect discussion, but is there anybody besides Waldrep and Smith-Shawver that you think might throw real major league innings that's a prospect this year? Because look, last year with Schwellenbach, I know there were fans of him in prospect circles, but I don't think anybody with truth serum would have been like, hey, that guy's going to be an awesome major league starter from day one in like May of last season. So maybe it's something like that, but and you can't project that. But is there a guy that you think like could help the major league club this year that's a prospect still? That's not Waldrep or Smith-Shawver?
Well, definitely, and it's going to be, of course, on the pitching side of things. I think there's really 4 players that you can look at. If it's going the starting pitching route, you have Lucas Braun, who was down in Mississippi last year. He's got fastball, slider, curveball, changeup. He's got good control of all of them. He can throw it inside and outside. Last year, look up his number, is fantastic. He was really intriguing, had great command last year, and that really helped his evaluation. Another player is Drew Hackenberg, who had a phenomenal 2024. I was lower on him. He showed that heavy sinking fastball that really played up extremely well. I think he had somewhere near a 60% ground ball rate last year, but he combos that with a slider and a solid cutter. I think those are two starting pitching options that might, and I think they actually will. Like the Braves, I think they had 13 to 15 starting pitchers or something like that last year. To make it through a full season, you're going to have to throw some players out there that aren't on your, necessarily your radar at that time. So I think those are two starting pitching prospects that we could see and we might see next year. In terms of relievers, you then have Domingo Gonzalez and Hayden Harris. Domingo's got that really nice fastball slider profile that a lot of relievers do. He was sensational. I think a 14 strikeout per 9 rate, and he was walking a hair under 4. And then with Hayden Harris, he's one of the most intriguing prospects I can remember because he throws 91 and 93. But his arm angle and the shape and his vertical approach angle is so dynamic that no one can hit it. He has a near 15 strikeout per 9 rate. I think his whiff rate on the fastball was like 50% or 55%. He's a bit one-dimensional with just the fastball. His changeup's lagging behind just a little bit. So, more exposure to major league hitting might have a little more risk there. But he's still someone that, because of that incredibly unique fastball, that it can play in the major league level, and we could see him in the reliever position as soon as this year, which would be kind of insane to think about because we're not even that long removed from him being an undrafted free agent who got his name out from LinkedIn. Like you just don't. It's a really incredible story. So I'm personally rooting for him quite a bit.
Yeah, that would be a wild one. And look, the Braves have a knack for finding these guys with great. I mean, Grant Holmes last year wasn't quite that, but like Grant Holmes was not. It was a former top prospect, to be fair. It was a big top, but was kind of way off the radar, and then something came back. And Tyler Matzik, and how many guys that can they do the weird, crazy redemption story on would be very interesting for sure. And look, you mentioned it, but just to say the number last year, that I think they had 13 guys make a start, and I want to say the previous year was like 14 or 15 made a start in the majors. And that's, some of those are sometimes they're like, openers or whatever, but guys who have started games in the last couple of years, Darius Vines, Colby Allard 2 years ago, Yanni Chirino started games 2 years ago. Alan Winans has started games the last 2 seasons. Like Dylan Dodd started game. You know what I mean? Like it's not always going to be a guy that you're going to pencil in for a month, but you might need another arm somewhere. And the Braves know that. Alex is very familiar and kind of acknowledges that in a way that most guys don't. He's like, hey, we're going to need 12 of these guys, not just 5, not even just 6 or 7. I mean, look, I've been hard on Bryce Elder. Our podcast has been hard on Bryce Elder. Bryce Elder is a perfectly fine depth piece. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
I don't think Bryce Elder is very good, but Bryce Elder in a lot of systems would be their 4th or 5th guy, and he's like their 8th guy on this team. So it's pretty normal, I would say. Look, I want to ask you about some guys that are not close to the majors. Keep that in mind now. For people to keep that in mind now as I'm saying that. One of them is Cam Caminiti, who you referenced earlier, the first round pick from this last year, still super young, far away. But are you enjoying? I think you already looked at the cat of the bag a little bit, but you liked that draft pick when it happened. What have you seen from him so far? Are you intrigued still in the way that you were when he was drafted?
Oh my! The fact that he using fall is kind of a rough adjective because, or not adjective, but a rough verb. I don't think that it's him being available when the Braves picked was honestly great. It's not that crazy because there were a lot of really good players that went ahead of him, but the fact that he was available was just fantastic for the Braves. He's got 4 pitches as is right now that are MLB average to plus. He's got fantastic control of all 4 of them. You just don't see it with a prospect that young for him to have that much control, that much poise on the mound, that repeatable of a delivery. I'm excited about watching him next season, or this upcoming season would really, really be underselling it. He's one of the most, what's the best way for me to say this? He's one of the prospects I have most been looking forward to during the offseason. I think that's the best way to say it. In terms of just overall ability and what the possibilities are for him. Like you're looking at someone that could potentially be a front end number one pitcher. That's not something that comes along that often. A lot of players, like the true ace potential is something that's limited to like what, maybe 8 to 10 pitchers across Major League Baseball. You know, the true dominating figurehead that you have, that you build your staff around. And while I'm not saying Cam is there right now, he has the potential to become one of those because he already has 3 above average pitches and he's got a quick developing curveball. And he's, by all accounts, from everyone I've talked to, he's got a great head on his shoulders. Someone that's ready to get into it this season and prove himself. That's exactly what you want from a prospect. That's exactly what you want from someone that represents your team. And I have to imagine the Braves were and are still over the moon about being able to add a player of his caliber.
Yeah, it's crazy. I realized this when prepping for this. He doesn't even turn 19 until August. He's going to be 18 for most of the season, which is pretty wild stuff. Which is why, look, he's not like he's not going to pitch in the majors this year, to be very clear, everybody. But when you're that young and you're as polished as he seems to be, what's like a reasonable track for him? Like, where does he end this season? Like, what level is he going to be at by the end of the year in your mind? If things are going well in the way that you're hoping that they will.
I think if things go very well, we could see him end the season in Mississippi. I can see a bulk of this year being in Rome, and I think he starts it out in Augusta, then he'll move up to Rome for a vast majority of the season. Once we enter end of July, if he's Caminiti, if he's doing what we expect him to do, that's someone that can end up finding himself in Mississippi as a 19-year-old, which again, like I was a freshman in college. At the age that he is right now, he should be studying for AP exams. Like the fact that he's doing what he is at that age and he's got this kind of promise, anyone watching, go out of your way to watch him pitch this year. He's going to be someone that you're going to want to watch develop.
Yeah, I'm realizing as we're talking, he's the first pro athlete that I could say that I've covered, quote unquote, that I'm literally 20 years older than. Because he was born in 2006, and I was born in 20 years before. You can do the math, everybody. 20 years before that, that's wild stuff. But hey, he's. I'm not an expert on 18-year-old prospect pitchers, but I've liked what I've seen. And by the way, everybody that I've talked to, people that I trust, like Gaurav, everybody's in on him. So I'm a buyer until I'm not. So there you go. I'm going to do a hard shift on talking about one more guy that I forgot to ask you about earlier. That's a familiar name, and he came up earlier briefly. Was Nacho Alvarez? He's always someone we get asked about because he's made the majors already. He is close to being there, but also people were wondering all winter why we weren't talking about him more at shortstop because of the Arcia bad season from last year, and we were pretty skeptical of Orlando overall. I will think he actually, just for the record, I think he'll be better this year than he was last year, but that's not the highest bar to clear when it comes to Orlando. But people were like, what, trying to square that honestly with, okay, you guys don't like Arcia. Why not Nacho, essentially? So that's a way of asking about Nacho Alvarez. What do you think of him at this point in time? Because it seems like there's a kind of a split on him in general, but like how good of a prospect he is and how much like he could help the Braves if he had to play, or maybe he would look if Arcia starts out slow again, maybe he does play some more this year after kind of obviously a rough stint in the majors last year.
So for me, when it comes to Nacho, my evaluation of him, the reason why, and I think I can speak for the rest of the battery powered team, the reason we have him in our top 5 is because his floor is that MLB quality utility player. No matter what, getting that MLB grade is something that a lot of prospects don't get. So the bare minimum of him being a major league quality player does mean a lot. However, I say that because after everyone was talking about Orlando Arcia struggles, I don't think you can move on from Orlando to Nacho. One, because of that overall downward shift in defense at the shortstop position being one. And then 2, I just don't necessarily believe in Nacho's approach at the plate. He's a very contact heavy. Let me first start it by saying his approach at the plate in terms of knowing the strike zone is on another level from most positional prospects. He knows what's a ball. He knows what's a strike. He's not going to swing at anything outside the zone. The issue I have with him is his approach in terms of he always tries to go the opposite way. He tries to always go the opposite of the way. He doesn't really pull to the power gaps. And from that, you see a complete lack of power in his overall numbers, especially if you look at AAA last year. He's someone that lives off of high. He's going to be like a high OBP because of that average, not necessarily because he's going to walk a ton, but because he's going to constantly make contact. And that's a skill. I mean, we saw Luis Arias, he's made a long career out of literally being
Sure.
able to just hit the ball. And that, again, I'm not going to take away from that. I still believe he's a major league talent, but he's not necessarily someone that I would want to see starting for a World Series type team, just because that high end potential with that bat isn't necessarily there. When it comes to someone like Orlando, we saw what could happen if everything is clicking for him. That's a top 15 shortstop in baseball. And when you factor in the defense, that's something a lot of teams would absolutely love. But when the contact wasn't there, of course, his ranking went down. That's something more along the lines of what I believe Nacho can do. Again, that's a long journeyman MLB career, and someone that's going to be super happy at the end of his career. But in terms of like what you want representing shortstop in a World Series contending team, not necessarily where I could see him excel. However, if you have him on the bench, someone that can take, spot starts at third, at second, sometimes at short, and then he's played first a couple of times too. Just positional versatility is his big key, and something I could see the Braves toying with a lot more this year. But in terms of like high impact, I don't see it yet. Let me just say yet.
Yeah.
Who knows what happened over the offseason? Maybe he made some adjustments to his swing and is looking to pull the ball more. And with that comes with a little more power, and some of those singles become doubles. If he does that, then yeah, it's going to be hard to keep him down in minor league baseball. But for right now, I think you let him start in AAA. You see what you get, and if it's similar, then you know what you have, and that's going to be a long-time MLB player. That's more of a journeyman, utility prospect, and that's not taking away anything from him.
Yeah, it's a good synopsis from what I understand too. And the thing about playing him over RC or whatever is that the Braves have told us, not even shown it, they've told us with their mouths as well as their actions that they want the defense at shortstop and they value that. And Orlando is just considerably better at shortstop by all accounts, it seems like, defensively. And also, if you're going to go to the young hotshot guy, you would want there to be like an upside play there, and it seems like that's like the opposite of Nacho. Like he's not an upside play; he's more of a he's projectable in some ways. So that's maybe a short synopsis of why he would not be a super logical option to do that. I mean, we've already seen it, and I don't want to make too much of this as we're talking in late February. He's playing third base in spring training. He's not even playing shortstop in spring training. Now I know it's only been a couple games, but like. Today, as we're talking on Tuesday, he played in the same game as Orlando. They played next to each other. He played third and Orlando played shortstop. It's probably a good idea to be like, hey, he's not necessarily going to be a shortstop forever. But hey, he's 21 years old. That's also fair to say. And he didn't have that run. I know you remember this probably even more than I do. He had that 10 days last year in Gwinnett where he just was like unconscious and people got very, very, very excited, which I understand, but it was probably not entirely real. It doesn't seem like.
Yeah, that was a special time, but unfortunately, you could look at the overall macro numbers, and it wasn't. You could tell it wasn't something necessarily sustainable. But again, I'm not taking anything away from him. I still believe he's his bare minimum is a major league player, and that's something I could never say for my life.
Oh, of course. I mean, of course. And look, he's a real prospect. It's not a super high upside, sexy one. But I'll put one number on it because I have it now in front of me. I believe, he has a career 396 slugging percentage in the minors.
Yeah.
Which is pretty limiting. Doesn't mean you can't be a good player. It's just that if you can't slug 400, it's not in the minors. You're probably going to have a ton of pop in your bat at the major league level. It's probably what it seems like, unless you change your approach considerably. We've gone longer than I thought that we've gone. So my apologies on that. Last thing before I get out of here, I always ask this to anybody that's covering draft stuff or prospect. I know you have your favorites. You probably talked about them already at some point. Smith-Shawver seems like a guy that you like a lot. Do you have a favorite guy or two or three? However many you want to name that we have not talked about in the system that's like maybe they're far away, but someone that you want to shed your light on and kind of be like, hey, one of my guys. Anybody you like?
It's unfortunate.
I know you have a lot of guys. I'm sure.
I think
it's actually funny. I work with Eric for so long on Battery Power that his list of guys was like, obviously Mike Soroka was like his guy, but also he had like when I asked him that question, it was like, hey, it's like you pull up the scroll and there's 15 names on it. He couldn't just name two people. So I had a feeling that it was going to happen with you too, which is fine. Go ahead.
I'll be as quick as possible when I go. If we remove Caminiti from the equation,
okay.
Giancarlo Lara is probably at the top of my list. He's got 2 MLB pitches with his unbelievable four-seam fastball and slider combination. It's just the command that needs to come. He's someone that could be in Atlanta this year. Going from there, the newest international prospect signing, Diego Torrens, is super intriguing, a true 5-tool player, along with the other 2 that they signed, Jose Perdomo and Luis Guanipa. I feel like I'm taking the easy way out by just naming a bunch of players, but these are players I'm really focusing on this year. Also from last year's draft was Nick Montgomery, the power hitting catcher that really came out of nowhere that the Braves drafted. I was unbelievable. I didn't even realize he was available when the Braves picked him, but I was over the moon when they did. One player that is coming back from injury that has had a bit of a struggle for his career, but I'm still very high on, is Alvarez Tavares, the shortstop that was with, I believe, Rome last year before he broke a bone in his wrist. With him, if we're thinking about Orlando Arcia's, really high upside, and that's, plus defense at short with really high power potential. When I say high, I mean, for the shortstop position.
For shortstop.
That's something Alvarez is, right? He provides genuine gold glove, platinum glove winning defense at short. Like he's fantastic at the position. His footwork is fantastic, and he's got a cannon for an arm. His power potential at the plate is honestly that, I can project it at 18 to 25 homers, somewhere around there. The thing with him is, can he make enough contact? And what's really gotten in the way of his development are these unfortunate injuries. He's had thoracic syndrome. I think that happened his first year. Last year, again, as soon as he had that hot streak, his power hot streak, he got hit in the wrist and fractured a bone. He's been sapped. It's just the worst injury luck. But when you talk to him, and I was able to speak with someone close to him last year after his injury, I wanted to ask what his mindset was, because this is like the 3rd year in a row where he's gotten hurt, and this one at a particularly terrible time. And it was for, I don't remember word for word, but it was along the lines of like, it happens. I'm okay with it. I'm here to, learn from it and get better for next season. And that's, when you go back a couple of years ago, we wrote about it on Battery Powered about how it looked like he disappeared during games. But now that seems to be completely gone. Apparently now he's just a model teammate, and he's someone that works extremely hard off, outside of games. And it's someone that I really think his skill set, if he can just, hit tool just gets a little bit better, and we start seeing someone that, is more in the 250 batting average range, that would probably put him at like a 250, 320 batting average OBP rate right there. He's someone that can 100% slug, 450 to 475 in the major leagues. He's got that kind of potential in his bat. So him really putting it all together is something the Braves could desperately need, and someone that they could really just plug in to that position as soon as next year and just keep him there for, 5 to 8 years. And that would sure up, the biggest hole during this prolonged run or prolonged window that the Braves have.
Yeah, I mean, with the defense, what we just talked about with Arcia, they really do value the defense. So if you could just hit enough, man, they're okay. We've seen now Alex is more than okay if you play good defense and you hit just enough, a little bit at shortstop. He's all right with that. So dating back, this is obviously different, but this is pre-Alex, but Andrelton Simmons was never a great hitter, man. It's just that he was that good defensively. I'm not saying he's gonna be Andrelton Simmons, because no one is, but there's a model for that. Like at that position, the bar is fairly low with the bat. You just got to be able to do a little.
If he's able to come in and be like a 750 OPS player, like that's one of the top shortstops in the league right there with his defense.
Sounds good to me. Fast forward, if we can simulate that in about a year's time, we will all be very, very excited. And I know that my guy Scott Coleman could take a deep breath and just be like, all right, no more shortstop talk for a long time. I think he's just Scott's been on the Orlando roller coaster for the whole winter, and he was like, man, he was convinced they were going to trade him or something, or trade for somebody else, and it didn't happen. And here we are again. Hey, Orlando again. I think he'll be better this year than he was last year. I fully believe that. I don't know how much better, but I think he'll be better. So that's a small win for the Braves. All right, before I let you go, this doesn't have to be a long answer. You feel all right about the Major League team? I know you're following the Major League team. Where are you on the major league team right now? Are you feeling good? Like, is it going to be are we back to 95 plus wins this year after the downturn of last year's injury stuff? Like, are you optimistic?
It's just the injuries. If everyone's healthy, this is a freaking good team, man. If your problems are that 4 and 5 spot, and we're talking about the players that we're talking about in that 4 and 5 spot, like a lot of people haven't talked about Schwellenbach and his ascension. Like I cannot fathom what he did last year.
He was so good, man. It was crazy.
The fact that we're now going to get a full, like, I was high on him already. I did not
Yep.
expect him to be this good this soon, and he's shattered my expectations. And he's someone that is like not really being talked about, and amongst like the key media members and across Major League Baseball. The lineup is crazy. It's stacked as is. When Orlando Arcia is your biggest question mark, like whatever, that's okay. You can have one question mark in your lineup. And who knows if it's Orlando from a couple of years ago, it's someone that's hitting, you get 750, 770 OPS. That's fantastic. And then with the bullpen, they got tons of arms that are very intriguing, not just in the major leagues, but also in minors, AAA and AA. Like you have lots and lots of depth, when high quality depth, when you're able to plug in someone like a Domingo Gonzalez in the middle of the season because of an injury. Like, that's someone who's probably on a major league team most of the time right now. And we're talking about him maybe being a fringe major league player. Like, there's too much to like about this team to even, I know it's kind of weird to say, to even be worried. Like, I'm not stressed about this season. I expect 90 wins. 90 plus wins, as long as everyone's healthy, as long as Acuna comes back and is Ronald Acuna. Like, no, I'm not even remotely worried. Wake me up when it's the playoffs.
Yeah, I feel kind of like you do, and I've had a few chuckles this winter of people acting like the Braves aren't good. It's like, guys, this I know they didn't do a lot in the winter. I get that. It was frustrating for us too, but they're still a good baseball team. They got a lot of talent on this team, and we'll talk about it. I appreciate you doing this, number one. Number two, people should be following all of your work beyond this podcast. So where can they find it? I will open it up to you. I'm sure there's a lot. You're like me. You have like 7 jobs, I feel like. So where can folks find all of your Braves and non-Braves? Anything you want to plug, go ahead.
Totally, yeah. Let's keep it Braves related. Let's keep it baseball related. You can find my minor league musings over at Battery Powered. I cover the minor league team, the Braves minor league system there. My podcast is Peach State Prospects. We exclusively talk about the Braves farm system. Or you can find me over talking analytics on my marketing job over at Baseball Prospectus. It's baseball, baseball, baseball at this house.
Yeah, we love some baseball. Look, I appreciate you doing this. I was like, you know what, we need to do. I was like, I've been trying to find a way to talk to Gaurav for a long time on a podcast. Anyway, it's been too long. I appreciate you doing this. We'll have to have you back if you're willing. I will maybe subject you to someone other than me, a better host than I am. We'll bring in Steven or Sean or somebody other than me. But no, this is great. I really appreciate you doing it. And you heard it here first. Ken Caminiti is apparently, is he like your guy? Okay, what? Last thing. One guy in the system. Is he your guy? Is it Smith-Shawver? Do you have like your number one guy? Is it Caminiti?
It felt that way to me. Every other year, it would probably be Smith-Shawver, but I think maybe I've just bought in too much. Maybe I'm just like deep diving too much into Cam Caminiti, where I'm all over him right now.
Yeah, I get it. No, we all have to have our guy. I mean, my guy, unfortunately, just because of where he went to college, is not out of the system. Jesse Franklin didn't go that well for me. I was mostly a bit. I never thought he was going to be a great player, but he was a Michigan guy, which is why I latched on. But hey, everybody has their guy, and it seems like your guy's Ken Caminiti. And look, he might be my guy pretty soon. From what you sold me in 5 minutes. So, all right, thank you again for doing this. Follow Gaurav's work everywhere he just named: Peach State Prospects, Battery Power, etc. Follow this show. Please subscribe to this podcast at Hammer Territory, anywhere you find your podcasts, all that fun stuff. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you all next time.